Like, I somehow think I want my students to know that I see them as real people, but I don't want them to necessarily see me. Like, I want to be superhuman somehow, right?
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of reflection and collaboration as we seek to keep growing as teachers. This podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 115th episode of the Hallway Conversations podcast. My name is Matt Beamers.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
And I'm Dave Mulder.
Our podcast is brought to you by our friends at the Center for the Advancement of Christian Education. We're always looking for topics of conversation and feedback, so please email us at hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. Your feedback and your ideas are important. Dave and Abby, I had the privilege of attending a few Christian school conferences this semester. I hung out with some of our friends from north of the border in Halifax, Nova Scotia on the east coast of Canada at the Christian Schools Canada Conference. I was on the west coast last week in British Columbia for the Inspire Ed Conference and also hung out in West Michigan at the CEA Conference. It's great. You know, some people refer to Michigan as the Mitten. Have you heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That's a thing.
Okay, so that's new to me as a Canadian.
Okay, yeah.
They're like, oh, where do you live? And then it'd be like, I'm like, oh, I don't know where Michigan is. And they're like, well, you know the Mitten.
They hold up their hand.
Oh, I actually don't know what the Mitten is. Anyways, one humble observation from traveling in different circles. I was struck by how many people encouraged us in the work we're doing with the podcast.
Oh, that's so good.
I also laughed at how many people made a comment that sounded something like, you're the face behind the podcast. And I'm not sure if that was a compliment about my face, but I found myself thinking, is there a way for us to share a bit of who we are outside of the classroom?
Oh, that's great.
So just to get us started, I have a few questions this morning that maybe ties into something we're wondering about that maybe, Dave, you can share later. Sure. So, Abby, I know you love this game especially. We'll start with an easy one.
It's her favorite.
What's a book you could read over and over? Ooh. Or you have read over and over?
Ooh. You gotta give me a book question. I have to choose a book? That's not an easy question. I need to think about this.
You're an English teacher.
I know, but I have too many favorites.
Oh, that tells you things about her right there.
What are some of your favorites?
Well, it depends what we're talking about. Like books, I don't reread much either. That's another thing. Okay. I've only read, I would say things I read to my kids are the only things I reread.
You've never read a fiction book or historical fiction?
Rarely more than one time, unless I'm teaching it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, the things that I teach, I reread, but not necessarily by choice.
Well, which one's so good that if you had time, you would reread it?
Ooh. I kind of love, a little bit of the American lit. So, My Antonia is one of my favorite books. I love that book, Willa Cather. Yeah. I'd probably reread Little Women. I haven't read it in a long time. All right. I'd reread Jane Austen.
Wow.
Quite a few, actually.
You're a hero.
Yeah.
That's not easy stuff.
No, it's kind of what but it's the stuff that, is not easy, so deserves, I feel like, a reread.
Okay. A second reading.
A second read. Yeah, so I'd probably go for classics if I was going to reread stuff.
Right. So I just have a total side question.
Okay.
What is a kid's book that your kids loved having you read over and over and over?
Yeah, we went through the whole, I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but we go through all of C.S. Lewis's Narnia. Okay. So we do the whole...
Yeah. They're so good.
Wow.
The whole deal.
Wow.
Yeah, which is
awesome.
Which is fun.
Cool. How about you, Dave?
Oh, man. I also am a reader, but I have pretty varied tastes. I am a rereader, though. If it's a book I liked, I will go back and reread it. One book that I absolutely love is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. It's a mystery, and it's set in this monastery in the 1500s, and then there's this visiting Jesuit priest who is kind of like the Sherlock Holmes character, and he's trying to solve this. There's a series of bizarre murders in this thing. It's fascinating and weird, and I've probably read it half a dozen times in my life.
Awesome.
So,
All right.
Yeah, I do love a series where it feels like the same book, but it's a different book.
Okay. Favorites? Do you have a favorite? Yeah, I know you talked about Narnia, but is there another favorite?
Well, I'm listening to Louise Penny's Inspector Gamache series right now.
I read the first book in that series.
So they're all different, but they feel kind of the same. I do like that.
Yeah.
How about you, Matt? Do you have a favorite go-to book?
I would say I was thinking about it more in terms of to change the question to meet my own needs. But what book do I wish I could read for the first time again?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
And I really wish I could do Harry Potter again.
Yeah.
Like, I just remember, like, I was in, mid-20s when that came out, and I was just like, it's the only time I've literally driven to the bookstore on the day, like the next one, and waited in line.
Right.
I just wish I could do that from the erase my memory and start from the beginning again.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, favorite snack, favorite meal?
Favorite snack, favorite meal. This sounds like such a basic answer for favorite meal. I could eat pizza every day. I love pizza. Yep.
Wow.
And I have not had a kind of pizza I don't like.
Okay.
Like,
New to me in Iowa, breakfast pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Never heard about it until I moved
Have
here.
you eaten it yet?
No.
Oh, you gotta give it a try.
I know.
Gotta give it a try. Scrambled eggs, little sausage on there. Yeah. No? Okay.
Favorite meal?
Favorite meal. Oh boy, that's really
These
tough.
are hard.
Yeah, this is good. This is pushing me to think.
I'm gonna finally try to pin you down on something, Abby, to grow up.
Favorite meal that I had, Missy and I, for our 20th anniversary, we were in Hawaii, and we did the whole luau thing. I did not have a thing I did not like at the luau. So that's, I mean, it's a little bit of everything, right? The Kahlua pork and poke bowl and taro. Okay, maybe not the taro, because it's like kind of pasty in your mouth.
I've never had that.
It's like sweet potato, kind of. It's like it's a root.
Just the look on your faces convinced me never to eat it again.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right.
but I loved it. It was good.
Abby, favorite snack, favorite meal?
See, now is this ever like I ate this one time, or is this something I go back to over and over?
Abby. You get to decide.
So much self-disclosure here.
Rules.
I hate favorite questions. Okay.
This alone is giving us our listeners insight into Abby.
Okay, I was texting my friends probably 2 days ago, good friends of ours and my husband. We went on a trip last spring, and I ate a meal in Mexico that I think about a lot.
Oh, interesting.
We went on this food tour it was in Cabo San Lucas, and it was called this Avo Cabo food tour, and she took us to all these local places.
Nice.
Yes.
That's
and
great.
so these little haunts that are like on the other side of town that are not touristy at all, that's just authentically and I had some ceviche that I cannot forget.
Oh, nice.
And I have a picture of the restaurant in my phone so that when and if I go back there, like I will be going back and experiencing that again. That's
Very
probably my
cool.
favorite meal in recent memory.
Yeah. Good.
Yes.
Abby, what's your spirit animal?
What do you mean?
Oh, exactly. What's your spirit animal?
Pass.
Passing is normative.
Non-normative.
Yes,
Passing is normative.
Okay.
Passing is always normative.
Okay, here's a different one for you. In baseball, when the pitchers come in, they have a walk-in song when they walk to the mound. If you could have a walk-in song as a teacher, what would be your walk-in song?
Pass.
Mine would be... I'm coming back to you on this. Mine would be AC/DC, something by AC/DC.
Yeah.
Something loud.
Thunder.
Yeah.
Thunderstruck.
Yeah.
Thunder.
Oh, there
Let's
you
go
go.
Thunderstruck.
There you go.
How about you?
Dave's turn.
Oh,
Dave's
man.
turn.
My teacher walk-on song. See, I'd want it to be something real dramatic or something, but actually be something ridiculous, like ABC by the Jackson 5 or something silly like that. That would probably
good.
be it, right? Or Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Sweet, or something
Good.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one more. Maybe
Okay.
a little bit more educational. You have to teach in the morning. What's part of your routine that helps you sort of get mentally, emotionally focused to teach? Like what kind of to get you psyched up or just focused besides coffee?
Besides coffee.
Besides coffee.
Yeah.
As I'm sipping my cup right here.
I like to come in early, like when I have an 8-10 class, and just sit and go through what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Right? So oftentimes I use admit slips. I'll read them before, like get a feel for what my students interacted with, go through my PowerPoint or whatever I have prepared, just rehearse in my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty standard.
How about you, Dave?
I have a pretty, I feel like a creature of habit. I have a pretty determined like morning routine that I have like basically every morning. Like I get up at this time and it's usually the same time and I have my pour over coffee and I have my devotions and I am a creature of habit in that way because that way I kind of have like my mind is set by the time I get to campus and by the time I'm getting into my office and that. Not that I have to do it that way, but I have a preference for doing it that way. So,
for sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
If any of our listeners have specific questions for Abby, please write in.
I won't answer them.
She won't answer them, but we'll try to ask them anyway. So, Dave, I know earlier today you were sharing a bit about your week, and in the context of being known a little bit, which is sort of where these questions came from.
Right.
I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of that story.
Sure.
You're okay with
I'm
that with our
comfortable with that.
listeners?
Absolutely.
And what the story itself left you wondering.
Well, exactly. So, full disclosure, I'm the sort who, like, even if I feel sick, like, I just show up and teach. Teachers, you all know this, right? It's way more work to have to miss class and to plan and stuff. We have a little bit more latitude in higher education here, I guess, but it's still, I put a lot of pressure on myself. Problem was, I was not feeling well before class. I was a little bit nauseous and a little lightheaded, and I was just like, I'll get it out through class, and we'll get through it, and then I'll go home, lay on the couch for a while. I was like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. So I get into class and I'm going for it in my lesson. And I had told the students that I wasn't feeling 100%. So I was teaching sitting down, which is atypical for me, right? Like I'm always moving around the classroom. And there came a point where it was clearly I was not fine. I was not going to make it through class. And so I was standing up to tell the students, you guys, I think we're going to call it. I'm not feeling well. And I had picked up a stack of papers. I was going to hand it to a student to ask her to hand them around to the class. And my vision just started to go black. And I did not faint. I stayed conscious the whole time, but I did go to the floor. And I was that dizzy. And it's just so embarrassing because I'm laying on the floor and I'm like, I'm fine, you guys. I'm like waving at them from the floor. And they're all like, Dr. Roller, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. Yeah. So I talked them through, like, here's the things that we're going to do for next time. And they were so sweet. A couple of them ran over to get another grown-up to come to the room and like check on me because our kids are grown-ups, right? Someone handed me a bottle of water, which was great, and all that. And it just had me thinking, like, I am. What's the right way of saying this? Like, I somehow think I want my students to know that I see them as real people, but I don't want them to necessarily see me. Like, I want to be superhuman somehow, right? I don't want them to, and. Like, this was actually a good lesson in humility for me because there's a sense in which, all of us, I think, need to know and be known. And at what level, this is an embarrassing way for them to know that I am a human being because sometimes I get sick. And I would be so gracious with them if they, like, Dr. Miller, I'm not feeling well. Can I go? Yep, go. Yeah. Please. I excuse that. I absolve you from that. But I don't for myself. Yeah. And so, anyway, it was just a good exercise for me in practicing a little humility, practicing a little, it's embarrassing to have something like that happen, but the students were all so gracious about it. And I sent them a message later in the day when I was feeling better. I did go home and I did lay down and I'm feeling a lot better now. But I sent them a message just like saying thanks for that. And several of them right away, like they must have gotten the email, they must have been on their computer when the message came. And they emailed me right back and like, we're so glad you're feeling better. We were really worried about you. I'm like, and for them to see me in that, like I needed that too.
Yeah.
So I guess that's really the question that I'm wondering. I wonder if we could talk about it. Like, what's the right level of self-disclosure? Maybe it's a weird way of saying it. We've been talking about ourselves and sharing some of our favorites and stuff.
Yeah.
And when we're engaging with students, I think we have to be a real person in some way. But what's the right level of being human with our students?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know the answer besides partly what my gut tells me about like what to share and not to share. I think one of the things that I've said to my class before is appropriate levels, age-appropriate levels of vulnerability. Like, right, and part of it depends on the audience, like older students, younger students.
Yep.
But I also think part of it is to make sure in sharing you're doing it for the right reasons. Like I've seen, I think unintentionally, teachers almost see their students as therapists. Like they share, they overshare in wanting to be vulnerable. And yet it's a bit too, like, that's not related to education. So, like I would say overall, and I could be wrong about this, I feel like I'm pretty open book in terms of relating to, say, my educational journey. Like I've shared some of it here. It's been a hard story. It's been a comical story at times. I'm totally good to poke fun at myself for my poor decisions. Literally yesterday, we were talking about, hey, the variety of students you're going to have to deal with. I put my grade 12 report card up there with the comment. Right?
That's some self-disclosure.
But I have no issue with that because, I get to control what I share a little bit. And I also want to share that to say, like, hey, like, you got to take the long view with these students. I had a chance to speak at my former school where I graduated from and worked last weekend. And I shared 3 stories, and I'm good to share them, but won't just because of time. But basically, one was I had a grade 8 teacher named Jane Whitty, who I was a pain for her, and she was irritated with me at times, but she never gave up. And she's the one who told me to become an English teacher. So my line in my speech was, Jane Whitty told me to become an English teacher, so I did. Even though she literally saw things in me I didn't see myself. I remember telling my volleyball coach, Ken Lodewijk, I was thinking about going to Dordt College in Iowa, and he said I should, so I did. So that was my line, so I did. And then similarly in grade 12, and I think I've shared this story too, I put a note on my teacher's desk that I was going to drop out, and he came out to my car and said, come back for one more day. So I did, right? And I think that's okay in terms of like, hey, this isn't too personal. This isn't about things outside of school. This is actually related to the work you're doing. And so that's how I sort of balance it, is to say, like, my home life is my home life. Sometimes I'll share things about parenting because they're going to be dealing with parents. But again, like, it's not to overshare. But I do think taking the long view with our students is one of the reasons I share a bit of my educational story. So how about you, Abby?
Yeah, and I think I do the same. I share a lot of my own early teaching, stories or stories from my teaching with students to illustrate things like, I cannot prepare you for everything. For example, right? Like,
there are things I never thought of before I had to do it.
Yes, correct. Or like I always say, when I'm teaching classroom management right now, we're in our classroom management module, and I said if the senior students that I taught in year 1 of my career were here listening to me teach you, they would laugh at me, right? Because you're bad at it.
Right. Yeah.
And so here are things, that you learn, and because you want them to have relatable experiences and realistic expectations. And I also think that, showing vulnerability is important too. I did something I have not done, I don't think, in my teaching career this week. Monday, I showed up to class, and I got halfway through my lesson on their reading that they had done for class period, and someone finally was brave enough to be like, Dr. DeGroat, you didn't actually assign this to us. We haven't actually read this yet. Because I had accidentally put the date of 2 assignments to Wednesday and not assigned anything for Monday. And I was like, you guys, you could, like, you didn't tell me that. And they're like, I know, but you were so into what you were doing that we just...
That's so good. It's so hard.
Hands, like, in the middle of class, I'm like, I'm sorry. This is totally my fault. Well, you got a reading preview, I guess, of your,
wait, you've never put the wrong date on an assignment?
I don't think I've ever taught...
Wow.
Not that.
You get used to it.
Not that.
You get used to it.
But, like, I don't think I've ever taught a lesson thinking that they read something that they haven't actually read. Like, I got halfway through class.
Can I ask you real quick, like, how was that for you, actually?
I laughed real hard, actually. We all did.
Yeah.
That's great.
Right? Yeah. And I'm pretty sure, like, I did something with my hands over my face, right? But it was a humorous situation. And then, like, teachers make mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to go with it. And one of them had requested a work day, and I was like, well, no wonder. And he was like, I know, you didn't assign us anything. And I was like, well, you had a nice weekend. Good, I'm glad.
How about the importance of taking the long view with our students? Like, in terms of us sharing stories, but also us, I don't want to say a prophetic voice. That's not, I don't know what the language is, but this idea of, like, seeing things in them that maybe they don't see themselves, or like,
Sure.
I don't know, maybe that's
Right.
related to the topic a
So
bit.
the way you said that just Matt, reminds me. So this past weekend, we had one of our grad students currently in our master's program who was in town. She was on campus visiting her daughter, who's a student, or undergrad student, and she just reached out, and she's in the ed tech track, so we hang out online. And she was like, "Hey, could we just get coffee? Because I have some questions." Like, great, let's do. And so we sat down together, and that was one of the first things that she said in the first class she had taken with me. I commented in response to her work, "This is like a grown-up, full-on professional teacher," and she was like, "You said I'm a good writer," and like that has sparked something in her, and like now she wants to write stuff as a result of it. And I was just like, let's not minimize then you said prophetic voice, and I think that like she is a good writer,
right?
But like she needed someone to tell her that, right? And so maybe even those small things, when we see things in students, to just be willing to name that. And that's a vulnerable place too, because you don't want to like step on kids.
And you have to be careful, because it makes me think, boy, we can't say those things lightly then.
No,
either.
that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a really good reminder for me of how our words as teachers do matter, actually, and even with grown-ups.
Yeah, I'm writing recommendation letters right now, and it's the same, right? Like naming, it's an art to name what you see in a student. Yeah, and really I think too, for I told you I'm teaching classroom management right now, and one of the hills I kind of die on with students is saying you have to figure out a way to like your students as people.
Yes.
Right? Like they're...
Yeah, say more about that.
Yeah, so there were students in my classes when I taught high school English who did not like high school English.
Sure.
Right? They were wonderful people who are gifted in the things that they do now.
Yep.
Right? But they were a pain. And
as high school students sometimes
and it
are.
took me a while to be able to separate that behavior inside my classroom from who they are as people. And I think when teachers are unable to do that and they only react to the behavior, and there's always contention and always, so I tell my future teachers, you have to figure out work relentlessly at figuring out a way to get to know students so that you can like them despite what they're doing in the classroom, despite their performance inside whatever little tiny niche role that you're playing in English or math or music or
I like that idea
whatever
of
you're
work
teaching
relentlessly. Like it is like it is a reminder, like we're the adults in the room.
We are.
Like it is. I can remember, like this is going to really date me, and probably many of our listeners don't remember, but I remember a TV show called Party of Five in the 1990s. And I was teaching, and there was a group of students in my class who we just could not connect. It's not that it was contentious. It just, it was nothing. There was nothing there. And I remember hearing them talk about how much they loved this show. And
it's a good show. I watched it.
And I remember, so now I feel old. But I remember going home and watching it.
Yeah.
Just on the offhand of being able to make a remark about a kid. Not that I want it to be, we got to talk about, but just to make a Party of Five reference in class. And just something like to find that thing that those kids are on about.
And or that they're experts in. Teach me about, tell me about this. Or, find ways, because who they're going to be, right, is you have to be able to see that long view of, what are the gifts. And living in a small community, I get to tangibly see who students become quite often in the roles that they have, and things that make them not a great English student actually serve them really well in their future occupations that I get to
run into them in the garage, or
correct.
You see them serving church or whatever.
So you have to preserve the relationship, that you're going to have with them for literally long term. I go to church with
Oh yes,
a bunch of my former students. Right? They are the parents of kids in my kids' classes.
Sure.
And so how can you make sure that you're seeing and speaking into who they are?
One of the things that I was thinking about in terms of my own vulnerability is, how do you balance as a teacher the desire or the need to be liked? Like, like you're talking about preserving that. Because I've worked with people who have also said, I don't care if they like me or not. Like, you don't care that your students like you.
Right.
And yet on the other hand, it's not like I so badly need to be liked. So How do you guys balance? What, like, because you have to have accountability and support, and there's going to be discomfort and tension at times. But I also don't want my students to not like me. So how do you, Dave, give us a word on that?
There's got to be some middle ground, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is the problem, right? And I'll point the finger only at myself here, but when I was a young teacher, I cared way too much whether or not my students liked me. And how much that drove my decision-making in the classroom. I'm embarrassed by that now, right? Like, there were things that I said and did because I thought it would help make the kids like me, right? Now, can you learn from someone you don't like? I think you can, but I think there's limits to how much you can learn if you don't have some kind of a relationship with the person. So that's why I say I think there's got to be a middle ground on that. And I think that there is a way that you can do this. Like you can be likable without that driving what your decision making looks like, right? And so I guess that would be the sweetest spot that you could land, right? Like you recognize out of your office as the teacher, you do have authority in this classroom, and they don't have to like everything that you do, but they can still be likable.
And I tell my students too, my future teachers, you cannot have your self-esteem rest on the opinion of adolescents.
Oh, yes. Right?
Not healthy.
No.
Not healthy, right? It has to come from a deeper place. You have to have a spiritual relationship with God. You have to be plugged into a church. You have to have, you have to take care of yourself spiritually, emotionally, mentally, socially. Yes, you have to have circles. You have to have ways to be a healthy person.
Right.
Or you can't put that onto students.
No.
You can't make students fulfill you emotionally, personally, socially. That's not a healthy.
Not at all.
No.
And it's actually unfair.
It is unfair.
To expect that.
Yeah.
To expect that of them, and it's going to create some unhealthy dynamics
But you don't want to. Like, you want them to know they're on your side, so you want to figure out ways to show them that, I think.
Right. I'm cheering you on. I'm going to do what I can to support you.
The things that I'm doing here, even if you don't like doing them, are because I think you have potential, and I want to hold you to that.
So, if I can just ask, because you've been pretty open about, hey, those first couple of years of teaching, those were tough. So what did you do to sort of show them that you were for? Maybe that's what I know, but or just maybe just in general, what might teachers today show their students that they're for them?
Yeah. So today we talked about a very simple strategy of like redirecting instead of like direct confrontation. So the example I gave in class was, a student is supposed to be researching something, they're playing a game on their tab. So instead of don't be doing that, hey, I see you're having trouble focusing on this task. Why don't you try, assuming the best, assuming that they are stuck somehow in their research and saying, why don't you try this strategy? I'll circle back in 2 minutes. It doesn't excuse, it doesn't let them keep going. But it does give them an opportunity to like do the right thing without this big confrontation, right? So just simple things like that. Or, I told my students, look for all kinds of ways that you can show them that have nothing to do with class. Like randomly when I was in my first year of teaching here, I had a student who was also kind of a pain in one of my classes, and he couldn't register because his immunization records weren't up to date. So I walked him through getting them in, and it changed the dynamic of the class. After that, because he saw me differently after that interaction.
You were a real human being who was caring for something he needed.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
And like it changed. It had nothing to do with the content of the course.
You can be a pain in class. I am going to help you with this because these things are. We are still. I am for you.
Right. So figure out ways to show up to their stuff. Talk to them about the game or
this has me thinking though too, right? Like sometimes I want to be careful about this. Like we can't solve all our classroom management problems. Oh, it's all relationships with students. But it's not relationships with students too. And I've wondered that sometimes, right? When I hear teachers who like I just can't connect with the student. But what have you tried? Like have you actually like talked to them before class, after class, while they're at work on whatever the thing is? Can you have a little side conversation with the student, right? And sometimes those small moments are things that just help build some of that relational capital with them. Then you can come alongside them for something else to help them out, right?
Oh, just being a presence in the school, right? Like just like I said, I know it's easy to say, oh, be at the door to greet or say goodbye. Be at the door to, if you can't, you can't do it every day, or be in the parking lot. I know you can't do it every day. Maybe it's not possible, but find those places where you can make those connections outside of the classroom. See what they're playing with at recess. See who they're hanging out with. Just to pay attention to the small things. I think that's why, like, even in university, like, kids love it when you show up for a concert or a game. Or
totally.
we saw your daughter in the playoffs.
Right.
She
Totally.
was amazing.
She was amazing.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Oh, but that matters. Like, to support her, to support you as her dad. Like, that's what it means to live in community.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Friends, we know your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for joining us today for another Hallway Conversations, whether it's this day, this week, this month. We hope the Lord gives you what you stand in need of, and we'd like to send you from here with this blessing. So to our listeners, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace. Amen. Have a good week, everybody. Thanks for listening.
This podcast was literally dreamed up during one of our actual Hallway Conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Hey, we have a favor to ask of you. Would you be willing to rate this podcast or write a review in your podcast app? Or if you found this conversation interesting or helpful, would you consider sharing it on your social media? Those things really do help podcasters out, and we would be so, so grateful. Thanks for listening, friends.
Awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, part of it is just, my own stubbornness and pride, right?
Yeah,
like, I'll be fine.
yeah.
I'm fine.
No.
I was not fine.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Spoiler alert.
Correct.